Thanks very much, Ale, and hello, everyone. I'm going to share with you the work that I'm doing in the cotton industry, one of my clients, to really grapple with how to make sense of this and enact change around in the farms that grow cotton in Australia. The work we're doing is pretty ambitious, and a lot of it's new, it's hard, and because it's new and hard and it's big, it's a work in progress and we get things wrong. But we're happy to share this with you for two reasons. One, hopefully it can help be of some use to some of you when informing your own work and your own decisions. And secondly, and conversely, really keen to hear from you what you think of our approach. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And importantly, how can we work together to get stuff done on the ground? So let me just start by just a very quick overview of the cotton industry. I'm assuming you can see my slides. I'll keep talking unless I hear otherwise. So the Australian cotton industry grown typically in that sort of that eastern cropping belt of Australia, from about the New South Wales Victoria border up to central Queensland, and starting to be grown in very small parts of northern Australia as well. It's grown in the summer. It's a summer crop as opposed to most of the crops that you'll be familiar with: wheat, barley, oats, that sort of stuff, which is a winter crop. It is a relatively small industry, about $2 billion in gross value. Australia as a whole in agriculture is about 60 billion, so it's small, but it has a big impact on the areas where it is grown, particularly because it's a summer crop as opposed to winter crop, so it have that continuity throughout the seasons. And also because it's typically, oh, sorry, Jackie's saying you can't see my slides. Sorry, let me try again then. I'll keep talking if that's okay, because it's all fairly background stuff at the moment. I know everyone's time is short. So what I was saying is that cotton is an important contributor where it is grown economically. And because it tends to be a high value crop, it improves the resilience of individual farms that grow cotton. And that in turn improves the whole farm resilience, which in turn improves the resilience of those little communities where it is grown. So it has an important place in the regions where it's grown, even though it's small. And finally, sorry, I'll stop sharing, so hopefully you can share when you can. Finally, it's grown when water is available. Pretty simple. When water is available, there's plenty of cotton planted, either for rain grown or for irrigated cotton. When it's not grown, there's not much water, there's not much cotton planted. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I do need to have the next slide. It's pretty important. So let me know, guys, when you're able to get that up, please.
We're working on it. Oh, we're seeing them now.
Oh, you see them now? Okay.
Yeah. Can you see them, Chris?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Perfect. So you let us know which slide do you need.
Yep. So please click through. And click. And are you clicking through, sorry?
Technology can ruin everyone's well-being.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry, go back one, sorry. Okay, and go forward one. Get there eventually. Okay, so that was the context about Australian cotton. If you go to the next screen, please. So that's cotton. We have an industry sustainability framework called Planet People Panic, which manages the most important social, economic and environmental topics at the whole of industry. Most agricultural commodities in Australia have a whole of industry sustainability framework, beef, dairy, others. And sustainability is incredibly complex. It involves systems of economies and societies and ecosystems, incredibly complex. It's made even more complicated, for reasons I don't understand, by a plethora of standards and reporting guidance and everything else, which makes it way overcomplicated. Managing sustainability is not that hard. It involves 4 key steps. Inclusivity, which is including the stakeholders who are important to you in your decision making and identifying what's important to them, prioritizing what's most important and managing what matters, and then managing what's important, measuring progress, and going back and telling your stakeholders what you do. That's what we're trying to do here. So in our sustainability framework, we've identified the social, economic, and environmental topics that are most important. Click, please. All of our areas are aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. Click, please. And we report annually on progress back to stakeholders so we can see what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, where we can improve. We report change year on year, but also importantly in agricultural systems where one drought or one flood can distort the picture. We report 5-year trends and longer so that we can give a more accurate picture. We provide as much transparency as we can through annual reports, succinct reports, but also Excel databases where people can go in and look at the data, look at the hyperlinks where the data sources come from, methodologies, assumptions, all of that. Click, please. If you look at wellbeing specifically, it's one of our topics that we know is important. And you'll see the outcomes in the take-up there, if you can read them, but they're fairly generic. So we talk about wanting to contribute to the improved wellbeing of people in cotton communities, and as a target or as a key takeout, looking to take a whole of agriculture approach to manage wellbeing, because cotton doesn't influence wellbeing by itself. It's such a big topic. So that's okay, but it's a bit vague. Click, please. When we look at sustainability as a whole, because there are so many ways to measure it, there is the Global Reporting Initiative, there's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Boards, there's different standards, a whole heap of them. Currently, or in the past, the cotton industry and most other sustainability frameworks, all other sustainability frameworks, we've identified our material topics, and then we have like a grab bag of indicators. We might have a GRI and an SASB and a this and a that, and here's one we got just because with the data available. All very arbitrary, and it's okay, but it needs to be improved. What we've decided is that, particularly in nature-based sustainability, there's a lot of new frameworks and a lot of new standards emerging. You may have heard of things like the climate-related financial disclosures, which come into law in Australia and often around the world later this year. The Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures, the Science-Based Targets for Nature, these sorts of standards. We've taken the view that out of all the plethora of standards and guidelines throughout there, these handful of frameworks are the ones that our customers of food and fibre are most likely to use. So we should align our frameworks to them. Click, please. And when you look at the language that those standards use, they all talk about condition, dependency, and impact. So instead of now having just a list of indicators from different standards and different guidances for each of our material topics, we've now organised our indicators into condition, dependency, and impacts. Just quickly to explain, condition, if you look at soil, for example, know how much soil we use to grow cotton or how much area. We can measure the condition or the quality by things like soil organic carbon or acidity or those sorts of things. What do we depend on soil on? Well, we depend on it to grow cotton, so we can measure how much cotton we get per acre of land, but also we can measure the ecosystem services that we depend on to grow that cotton. Things like water infiltration or water holding capacity or nutrient cycling, these sorts of things, right? And finally, we can say, well, what impacts the condition and what impacts the dependencies or ecosystem services? And it might be things outside our control, like floods or droughts, or it could be things inside our control. And in the case of soil, which is a living system, we talk about soil to look after it because it's living, it needs food and shelter. So as a farmer, choose practices that don't disrupt the habitat, the shelter of your soil, choose practices that give your soil lots of food and a diverse diet, if you like. And we can measure all those things, okay? Click, please. Now that's really interesting for natural capital in particular. And sorry, one thing I was going to say as well is that what this allows us to do, sitting behind this then is a very big Excel spreadsheet, which has all the indicators from those standards by default. So TNFD and science-based targets for nature by default are our indicators for natural capital there. We have by default indicators for Global Reporting Initiative for our social and our economic indicators. So this gives us a single Excel spreadsheet, which allows us to enter data once from whole of industry and do multiple things. One, it gives us much more clarity of insight into our impacts and our progress, so we can make better decisions as an industry. This is a work in progress, by the way, and it's all freely shared with others to learn from and to give us feedback on. So we can make better decisions as an industry. But also we can do things like Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures and other standards are incredibly complicated. And our customers around the world who are very time poor and often don't have much knowledge of agriculture and environmental systems are really struggling with how to apply these very complicated standards and guidances to complicated multi-commodity global supply chains. Our thesis is that if we can say, here is the data you need in the format you need it, in the language you need it, it makes it much easier for them to buy Australian cotton. We can also do things like measuring and putting a value on this. Ken Henry yesterday spoke about how he's the chair of the Accounting for Nature, which measures and values change condition. we're looking at applying natural and social capital protocols to measure and value changes in dependencies and impacts in selected social and natural capitals. So again, we can get better, richer information and make better decisions. We can do other things as well, like integrated reporting, and Tony spoke before about the links between ecosystem services and social capital. Integrated reporting says you can draw down or you can increase stocks of all these sorts of capitals, but it has flow-on effects elsewhere. So we can use more or less water to grow cotton, but that will have impacts, positive and negative, on other stocks of natural and social and economic capital. So a lot more work we can do with a single set of data. That's what we're trying to do here. Where it gets interesting for you guys is when we look at workplace and we've merged wellbeing into workplace. And I think it really helps us when you look at dependency and impacts, give much more clarity into for how we look at this, and maybe for you guys as well. Social sustainability reporting and wellbeing is something which you kind of have to report, and it's often seen as a nice to do, but the really hard, tangible why we're doing this and what do we need to do is often missing. When we look at it through a dependency and impact lens, we get a lot more clarity. If you can click, please. So we've gone previously from having the standard indicators that everyone reports on in social sustainability, diversity and accidents and that sort of stuff, by looking at our dependencies and impacts. So if you click, please, looking at dependencies initially, a lady called Ruth Neville from University of Melbourne, who many of you probably know, did research recently into the cotton industry, looking at the business models that farms use, and most farms would have a similar, and grossly paraphrasing a very, very big and important piece of research, basically said, farms have the mum and dad farmers and often core employees and permanent employees who they keep, who they rely on, and then they get casual or contract labour to deal with those seasonal needs for excess labour. So when we think about dependencies, what do we depend on human capital for? It lends itself to a pretty obvious three things. We want to keep farmers, we want to attract people when we need them, and we want to keep everyone safe and skilled. Sounds obvious, but it hasn't actually been written that way before. And then click, please, if you look at, well, what impacts those dependencies? And again, looking at research that Jackie and her team at the Regional Wellbeing Survey have done, looking at other experts, we've identified what we think are some impacts that impact those three dependencies. And out of that falls indicators. Click, please. And I apologise if this is too small, but this is just showing how, if our dependencies to keep farmers and core employees, it's not the obvious stuff. You might think the obvious stuff, that people would leave the land or leave job as burnout, on a farm, too many hours, but that doesn't register at all, or very lowly. It's things like management style. A people-focused management style, as opposed to a process-focused management style, is more likely to keep people, those core employees, working. Automation and tech is often seen as something that's reducing employee numbers in the regions, but actually what we're seeing is that, or what our thesis is, that it makes farm more enjoyable and safer and interesting for farmers and their core employees, and people who you want to keep. It reduces the demand for that casual and contract labour. And other aspects, having less volatility of water, those well-being type aspects you can see there. Those things impact keeping farmers and core employees, we think. And so we're going to test that more, but that gives us a lot more insight into what we need to be managing as an industry and encouraging others to do. Similarly, for attracting casual and contract labour, we have a thesis that people who are backpackers or migrants or grain nomads will be more likely to work for the cotton industry or any farm industry if they trust it and they have a good perception of it. So trust, we know from multi-year cross-agriculture research that the dominant factor of trust in agriculture is environmental responsibility. We think that in terms of having a good perception, this is where human rights comes in. If we can provide evidence that cotton farms are safe and inclusive and welcoming, then people are more likely to want to work in our industry. And also we know that customers are more and more wanting to get evidence of human rights. So it's killing, again, two birds with one stone, and so on. Click, please. So then if those are our impact drivers, the indicators for that fall out fairly logically, either from the Global Reporting Initiative or, click please, from things like the Regional Wellbeing Survey, which are highlighted there. Now, Jackie's report that she did for us is a fantastic report with a stack of indicators. We can't measure everything. In our view, this is measuring what matters. And you'll see that what gets interesting is that none of these things that particularly that impact whether we keep farmers and core employees or not, most of them don't don't happen on the radar of the reporting standards like Global Reporting Initiative. There are additional stuff that you have to think about. You have to look at the impacts and dependencies for these things to pop up. So standards are great, but they also can lean towards box ticking, which is not great. So having a think about what we depend on as an industry, or for yourselves, what you depend on as a society or a place, and what impacts that, I think is a really, really great way to look at more clarity. Click, please. So that's the policy. How do we make this, turn this into action and stuff on the ground? When well-being in particular is so complicated. Well, I'm going to give you an example here. Something else that's very complicated is biodiversity. Click, please. If you think about biodiversity and native vegetation on farms, it can be a sensitive topic, but it's also a really confusing topic. Click, please, because there's so much noise and conflicting and confusing everything out there. It's really, really hard for people to know what to do. And we know through research that cotton farmers, when we say what's stopping you doing more to restore or protect vegetation on your farms, they say that it's just too confusing. We don't know who to trust. It's easier and safer to do nothing and just keep doing what we're doing. Now, we're not happy with that, particularly because, click please, we know that native vegetation and biodiversity is a new carbon. This is pressure that's coming down the supply chains from us to give more evidence of how we're managing biodiversity and nature in our supply chains. We've taken the view that because biodiversity differs by region, it makes sense to manage biodiversity on a regional basis. Click, please. In Australia, there are 54, as it turns out. Can you just click there, please? Sorry. There are 54 natural resource management NRM regions. 7 of those are in the regions where cotton is traditionally grown. So each of those 54 regions has identified regional priorities for natural capital in their region. So for us, it makes no sense for the cotton farm industry or for individual farmers to do ad hoc work or reinvent the wheel. Let's align individual farm action, and about 1,500 farms grow cotton in Australia, to these regionally identified priorities. So we've been working with these NRM organisations for 3 years to have consistent indicators that are aligned to what our customers are expecting to see, developing methods to measure native forest and native vegetation on cotton farms. But there's no point having good data if you don't actually have action in the right progress. So to get rid of that confusion we saw previously, click please, we're working on a model of having regional hubs. So that if you're a cotton farmer, one of 1,500 cotton farmers in Australia, and you want to take voluntary action to improve, to restore, to protect native vegetation on your farm, you go to a one-stop shop in your region that tells you what to do. We'll look at the satellite map of your farm, we'll look at the satellite map they have of the regional identified priorities for native vegetation and biodiversity and natural capital, and say, on your farm, I can see you've got little patches of vegetation along the riverbanks. That's fantastic. We'd love you to have a couple more patches here and here. Here's the species we think we'd love you to plant because there's a threatened species. Here's the seedlings. Here's the discounted fencing to fence it off. Here's the volunteers to help plant it. Everything is in one place. And that one place then, if you have, let's say, 54 regional hubs around Australia, provides 54 hubs for governments and banks and customers and everyone else to funnel all their resources and all the goodwill into and get extended out to individual farmers to do precisely what needs to be done on their farm that most contributes to regional and state and national and global outcomes. That's our logic. Hard piece of work because it involves many people, but we are making some progress. And our logic here as well is that if we can make this work for cotton on native vegetation, click please, we can make it work for every other agricultural industry on native vegetation. So we can roll this out nationally, and there's one-stop shop hubs for coordinating action on native vegetation and biodiversity right across Australia. Click please. And I'm coming back to you guys, if we can make this work for native vegetation and forests on farms, we can also make it work for other sources of natural capital. So regionally coordinated, regionally appropriate actions and support for water or for soil, for other aspects. And also, we can make the same model work for social capital outcomes. Click please. Doesn't have to be the same regional hubs that manage natural capital, but they need to be integrated because, as you've all heard, there's so much connectivity between the two. But as a concept, as a model, we'd love to explore if it's possible to have regional scale strategies that coordinate all the goodwill and all the action on well-being and social capital into regionally appropriate actions that are tailored for every individual farm or city or community. Click, please. And so that's my message for you. When it comes to putting the so what into policy, our thoughts is that looking at that through what society, or what a place, or in our case, what an industry depends on and what impacts those dependencies really brings or has a potential a lot more clarity. And then when it comes to putting that policy into action, I think we need to talk more. Honestly, we need to collaborate and be serious about collaboration. There's a lot of goodwill, but there's a lot of confusion out there as well. So genuine coordination and collaboration, I think, is really important. And for me, regions are the Goldilocks scale. States are too big, towns are too small, regions are just right. So I'll finish there. Thank you very much.